open, unencumbered, and readable. Visitors to websites are scanning for information. They're not reading intently at the beginning. So titles, clarity, that's my goal. So I took a few pages from your website and reformatted them. So let's start with your homepage. So I find this to be, the header especially, to be cleaner. It's centered. There's white space. You know where you're at. The second thing I did was look at your trustees page. There's not much here. So I took your trustees page and I took your committee assignments, and I combined those pages because they just seem so close together. So this is what I did. Now I didn't do everyone's picture, only did 3, but here's title, photo, committee assignments, email address. This is a clean, open, unencumbered design. Next, I looked at your history page. You utilize this, it's called an accordion feature, where it expands down the page out of sight. Accordion features can work when you have snippets of information. This is pages of information. So what I did, and also I noticed in the URL of this page is called galleries. That's confusing to human and computer alike. So a simple fix is to call the page history. So this is what I did. I made each century its own page. So you can go to the 1600s, scroll down, find your information. It's some really fascinating information from the 17th century. But each century has its own page. So I'm going for clarity is very important on this. Next. All right. So you have a blog, and it's called What's New? Here we go. This can be improved. So what I did was, and I just took 2 samples and I called it news. I created a post for your news items or announcements or something. And you guys can review this demo whenever you have the time on your own time. But I felt this is a much clearer way to define your content. 2 more things. Your meetings, you have, again, I'm trying to group things together. So again, you're utilizing the accordion feature on this page, and you have agenda, video, and they're in separate locations. What I've done is put them in one location. So here's your agenda for 2 weeks ago, and here is the video associated with it. And it's really great that LTV is using YouTube, so we can just drop in these videos. So it's on one page, it's searchable. Finally, which we just did today with Susan, you have a store application, you have an e-commerce application called SquareUp. I integrated that into the website, and this is just a simple example. We can put all your items on that page and utilize that SquareUp e-commerce app. So this is just a sort of just an overview of what we can do to improve your website. Let me know if you have any questions. Yeah, there you go. You can look at it on your on your own time.
I'm going to jump in and just say that Michael has been really worked a lot. We worked together on this for the last, 3 weeks now, Michael? And he was really dedicated to making sure that we had some sort of demo for you to see that really is improving our user-friendly website. It's making the trustees, in my opinion, more relevant in the community, because people who will come here, they will be able to access information, contact us directly based on our, the committees that we're on. And I think he's done a wonderful job, and I really thank you very much, Michael. Going forward, I have complete confidence that you and I can work together on this, keeping it updated, keeping it relevant to what's going on and what we're working on. I think that's really important, and it will bring people to our website. Also, again, this website is attached to the town website, so people can see it there as well. And I think it looks terrific, and I thank you very much for bringing this to our attention.
You're welcome.
You're a pro.
I'm going to tell you, I'm impressed. This is very nice.
Yeah, I'd like to say something. I like linking the YouTube meetings and the rearrangement of things that are already there. But I think we should probably try to go a little further as far as putting updating information that the public will actually use. Like data like closing of Georgia Pond. Where can't you crab? What are the water quality reports?
Mm-hmm.
If I want to go into South Lake with my family in Montauk and go swimming, what is the water quality report there? Can I go in that water? So I'd like to see the website really go a lot further as far as being a public use website rather than just seeing what committee I'm on. Mm-hmm. I'd rather see it being updated with real-time data, rather than us posting signs on bays and Ecobonic Harbor's open here and not there. I think this website should really be used as a tool by the public that is looking for information. Where can I go do this? Where can't I do this? And so I'd like to see that go a little bit further, because I love what you guys are doing, but I definitely think that we need to move into a little bit more real-time information to get the public to come to this website and learn more about us, but also to get information.
Tim, you're exactly on target. That's absolutely what the goal of this website is. And in fact, we'd like to have a section where people can go to the applications. And Allison said that she could turn them into fillable. So you could actually open up the application for mooring and fill it in, and they can send it out. You're absolutely correct, but this is just a sample. So what I'd like to ask everybody on the board is, if you have ideas for things you'd like to see on the website, send them to me. I'll forward them to Michael, or you can send them to both of us, but for now, send them to me. I'll forward them to Michael, and we'll start to develop this. This is just a sample, just the look and so forth, but you can see that it's becoming, it's far more concise, it's more, it's cleaned up, and it has a purpose that will make it user-friendly. And I think that's the main key for us, is to make this website user-friendly, where people can find information that is timely, as you say, that they will go to, and they will find the information, and our office won't be inundated with telephone calls, trying to steer people. Will go here, go there. So yes, if you have ideas, send them to me, and I will forward them to Michael, and we'll start to work on this. Obviously, I sent the proposal in to everybody by email today that Michael created. So I'd like you to take some time, read it over. If you have suggestions or questions, send them to me, and I will, between Francis and myself, we'll get a hold of Michael, and we'll start going.
No, Tim, this is exactly the kind of things I want to hear as a website designer. You guys are the subject matter experts on this website. So you tell me what is important. That is essential to making a functional website.
Great.
Thank you.
How easy will it be for our office or individual trustees to add things in, like, minutes from a meeting or something like that, or a closure that just came up? Is that going to be something that can be done by our office or individual trustee, or is that going to always have to?
So this is built on the same platform as your current website, which is WordPress. Also in my proposal is a year of tech support, which also covers training. So I can help you out.
Okay.
I think it's easy.
Yeah. And also, Michael, in Michael's proposal, there's an hourly fee, as there was with the last person that worked on the former website. And if we need Michael to add things like you do, Michael, I think for Georgia Capon with Sarah, right?
That's
So
right.
Michael is capable of, we can send him things if we want to have that cost on an hourly rate, and he will add those things to the various different locations that need, where their department is.
Okay.
So,
Do we have an approximate annual budget on this?
I sent everybody a proposal today
Oh, you
with,
did?
yes,
Okay.
so if you could
I didn't look.
take the time to look at it, read it over. Tonight was just for Michael to present the differences between the old website, the current website, and the new one going forward. And as you see, it's just samples of things that we thought we should, for this presentation, give to you, so you could see the just the layout itself is so much cleaner, and the consolidation of information about the trustees, and then there again, adding your official email. This is, I think, a very direct way for the people to reach out to us, which is really what we want to be, is available to the public for answering questions that the office oftentimes gets, and then it gets shuffled around. So if you read the proposal, and maybe we can revisit this at our next meeting. That'll give us 2 weeks to look through everything, make suggestions, send me information. I will be very happy to give you Michael's email as well, in an email to you, and you can send directly your thoughts if you'd like, or send them to me and I'll send them to Michael.
Hey, Susan and Michael, this is Rick. I have a question, something that Michael just mentioned and you mentioned about charging for updates. I think it's important that we do get a certain amount of time to make sure that the content that's needed to build out the site to the vision you guys are outlining is put in place, and interested members, Tim seems to have some vision for this and Susan has some vision for this, really get up to speed. WordPress is a great platform. We got started with it 5 years ago. I think that was a good decision. I don't think we got as far as we had hoped with the current support company, and I think it's time, the 5-year itch on a website to freshen it up. But I just don't want to see us get to a point where we get to a certain degree of progress and then the meter starts running when we just weren't quite ready. So I just want to make sure that we're including a certain amount of time to get content on the site, at least initially, and that the training is there, so that the leadership members of the records committee can do some more administration. I think that may be where we fell a little bit short in the initial effort 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm. All good points, Rick. And I think that's what, what Michael and I and Francis, the reason for the change is that we will be able to work on this ourselves, but also have Michael, who can immediately do something that we need to have done that we may not be able to have full knowledge of. I think it's important to have a professional person with the access to that kind of help, because none of us are, or at least I'm not a website designer. I have worked with website designers on other personal websites, but I think Michael has the talent and he's got the eye, and he's really done a great job, in my opinion. So again, if you have ideas, please forward them, and we'll get everything on here. Michael's, ready, willing, and able. Right, Michael?
I am.
Okay.
Great.
All right.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll come back in a couple of weeks and talk about it again. Thank you very much, Michael, for coming.
Have a good
Thank
evening.
you, Michael.
Happy
Thanks so
Thanksgiving.
much, Michael.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Yes, you too.
Thanks.
Sounds very good.
Hey, Matt,
Yes,
do we have anyone on the phone?
we do not have anybody, and just for the record, the phone number works. I've tried it twice, so if any problems ensue, it's going to be on their end.
Okay.
Is the phone
so-
number visible? I don't see it.
I'm sorry?
Is the
Okay.
phone number visible for people to call in? I don't see it.
Yes, it's on YouTube, and it's on
Oh.
channel 22.
Okay.
All right, so let's move on to, we have Steve Borner and Rick Whalen here to report on their study of the Northwest Historic Research.
Steve, you there?
Rick Whalen, yeah. Where's,
Where's Steve? I was going to let him do most
there
of
he
it.
is. Steve's right up there.
There he is.
This is Rick Drew for a minute. First, I just wanted to thank Steve and Rick Whalen for their research, their knowledge, and putting this all together. It's a very interesting report. It's still a work in progress, but a lot of research has gone into it, and some very interesting findings are coming about and confirmations of some existing information. And I really think it's going to be very helpful to this board and to future boards to have all this information documented. So I just want to say thanks, guys. And I'll turn it over to Steve if he's online to start it, and then maybe he and Rick can collaborate a bit here and bring us up to speed.
Well, thank
Steve,
you.
is Steve on?
Thank you, and thank you guys, and appreciate the patience as well. It's a slow, long process, and until a couple of months ago, I was trying to do it forward and backward concurrently. But this year, just not having access to Suffolk County records, so really been just concentrating on building it forward to present time, and hopefully soon we'll be able to get back and do research, get the deeds and file maps. But luckily, I've been able to get some information and records from Suffolk County for the Northwest Creek dredging. To try to get some answers to the history there for you guys. It's the big geographic range, and is interesting, and I hope that it's productive many times over for everybody.
Steve, you want to start walking through the format of the report and the geographic breakdowns, and maybe touch on some key points, and then maybe Rick can weigh in with a legal perspective?
Sure. Per your guidance as well, broke it down geographically from west to east, Sag Harbor, to Little Northwest Creek, and so forth, as it's arranged in that report. And we know that the trustees allotted bottomlands out in Sag Harbor Bay. Everyone knows that. As far as the highways on the beaches, there's lots of examples of that, as far as them identifying these beaches as both common land, which could mean undivided, yet to be divided lands to proprietors. But in case in East Hampton, they were left open, and they even call them public highways, which is significant. And the meadow allotments, we know, were very early, very important, and they provided for highways through these necks of land for them. Many cases they said permanent, but they did exchange and move them for private property owners like Russell. We know that. Thousands and thousands of conveyances that we've analyzed do not include the water, the salt water. So they go, like in the case of Northwest Creek, they go to the water, which would mean the mean high water for all intents and purposes, but not out into the center line of any bodies of water. Little Northwest Creek the village of Sag Harbor boundary lines created in the 1800s specifically say bounded by, not to the central line. In many cases, private property owners, particularly freshwater bodies of water, the adjoining upland owner would own out to the center line of these, whether it be a pond or a river or a stream, but no examples of this here. So
Hey, Steve, what about the beaches there from, let's say, Havens eastward to Little Northwest Creek and then Little Northwest Creek to Northwest Creek? Part of that's the Russell deed. I thought there was another one to a Miller. And I think in both cases, they're bounded by the beach. Is that correct?
correct. And as we know, with the up in this area, we've got they call them cliffs, C-L-I-F-T, cliffs or banks, with the beach on the northern side of that. And we know with the situation with Kirk lawsuits with the erosion, to me, there's some confusion to that, the interpretation, stating that the beach is gone, so that there goes the easement or the highway. So I don't know, Rick, do you have any comments on that legally? I
Well,
know you know a lot about Kirk.
and I guess my comments mostly would be general at this time. First of all, if you have all seen the document that Steve circulated, this is basically an outline, and for an outline alone, it's pretty daunting. Steve is a researcher par excellence, as you guys can see. What I did years ago, I went through all the town records and town trustee records, and I annotated them. And particularly in the town records, when the major land allotments were being granted, a lot of those are found primarily in volume 4 of the town records. I did I tried to piece them together as best as I could to figure out where different land allotments were. And so I have given that information to Steve, but Steve is really kind of taken to a whole nother level, and probably would be much further advanced at this time, except that Steve has pointed out, you can't get to the county clerk right now. If you wanted to go research or find some of these early deeds, the Suffolk County Clerk's office is closed except for professional title examiners who work for title companies. The general public cannot go in there. Even someone like Steve can't go in there. So that's obviously been a problem, for the time being. My overall question, though, here's the question I really want to pose to the trustees at this point. Just exactly how broadly do you want us to make this? Because as I indicated, Steve's outline is very, very broad. At the end of the day, I'm kind of curious as to what areas, what types of land, what specific locales the trustees might be interested in. Now, you might not have enough information always to know what you should be interested in, but we all kind of generally know that the trustees, particularly in Northwest Woods, your major land holdings, really your remaining land holdings are going to come down to underwater lands, beaches, and roads. There isn't much by the way of upland, not zero, but very little upland other than roads that the trustees have claims to. So, I wonder if there's a way that we could refine this so we don't have to go all over the place. Now, Steve likes doing the research, so don't get me wrong. He just might come up with a 300-page document whether you want it or not. But at the end of the day, there'll be conclusions and findings at the end of the document. And I would hope that I'll be primarily working on writing those and let Steve do most of the research. But I kind of want to know what it is you think we should be mostly focused on.
Hey, Rick, this is Rick Drew. There's a lot of projects and other municipalities that are continuing to evolve and weigh in. You know, a couple of years back, you remember we had dredge spoil, really rough dredge spoil that was deposited on Havens Beach, much to the chagrin of many, many residents of East Hampton. And we weren't really sure of our standing there, you know. And if the trustees have legitimate rights there in an era of diminishing resources and sustainability, I think it's our responsibility to look out for resources on behalf of our community. We have Little Northwest Creek has been deemed a polluted water body, no longer open to shell fishing. We were asked to take the lead, and it looks like we are the legitimate owners there. So, you know, this is an ongoing saga. You know, to have beach access rights for our community, we have private citizens claiming private ownership of beaches to the west of Little Northwest Creek. People there like to walk the beach and go swimming. If it's legitimately owned by the trustees, it should be available to the public. So unfortunately, under the scope of beaches, bottomlands, and roads, we set out to do something from Sag Harbor Village to Cedar Point. And I think those guidelines still stand, with perhaps some prioritization and maybe an incremental approach, that there are some interested, you know, properties of interest now, and maybe there's a phase 2 later on for those that seem to be kind of stable and not really an area of mutual jurisdiction and things like that. I hope that helps a little bit.
Well, Rick, yeah, that helps. I think what you're saying then is in that area, really from Little Northwest Creek, the mouth of Little Northwest Creek west, your concern, the trustees' concern, is do the trustees own the beaches, or which beaches? That's
one of the concerns, yes. And then, you know, we have issues with pollution and boating and sewage treatment plant testing going on. And, you know, we've had a seat at the table, but honestly, we kind of had to bulldog our way into the discussion. And you remember, you know, back at your tenure, the initial discussions with the village and such. And, you know, it's, you know, we have a lot of constituents there. You know, on the western end of town, up to Town Line Road, we have a large constituency that enjoy Sag Harbor Bay, Sag Harbor Village, Sag Harbor Mooring Field, the new expanded Mooring Field, and all of Northwest Harbor.
Right, right. So the harbor and the beaches at the very least.
And clarifying the creeks.
Right.
You know, if we're responsible for Little Northwest Creek, I think, you know, someone needs to take ownership. It's been sitting there getting neglected for, you know, since the 60s. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we have Barnes Meadow Creek. We have Elwife Brook that's a little unclear. Northwest Creek itself, it seems like the trustees were badly strong-armed back in the 60s and 70s. And, you know, that's unfortunate. But there's an example of an amazing public resource that was, you know, I hate to say it, but kind of gerrymandered away from the trustees. And I don't know if it was a weak trustee board, they got bad advice, but it just seems like there's just a huge open question there of, you know, why they issued a quitclaim deed under certain parameters that never came to fruition. So, you know, it's something where it just seems like, you know, when the trustees make a case, it's tough for them to make it, but everyone's ready to grab the lands and everything when it's considered common.
Thanks, Rick.
You're welcome. Steve,
Yeah,
do you want to continue a little bit, maybe continuing around the horn a little bit with some of your preliminary findings, and then we can maybe just wrap it up with some next steps?
Yeah, I'd like to just comment on what you just said, though, that, and I agree with that, because when people make claims, whether it's private property owners or municipal, I feel that it's incumbent on them to prove what they own and where exactly they own. So, I mean, you know, doing this type of forensic title work is not for the faint-hearted. It's very complex, very tedious, time-consuming, and you know, for somebody to say, "Well, we got it from you know, monks in you know, the 20s or so, and monks got it from Terry." Well, we're going to be able to easily and accurately check those and backward and forward and say, okay, when did this change hands and what exactly changed hands. And that's been the goal all along here, is to say, where are these properties? Where are they bounded by? And it's critical. And I think that the trustees are absolutely in a very strong position to confidently, when we're done, say, yeah, this is the history of this parcel or area. This was the original usage and boundaries, and whether it's changed or not, be able to say emphatically. And if somebody disagrees with that, well, then put it to them and say, well, prove it.
Well, we should know if we're going to do this level of detail. By the time we're done, we'll know whether somebody else makes a claim, whether they have a valid claim or not.
Right.
One of the things that Steve is referring to right there is, so, and this isn't yet really nailed down. I've yet to see the actual full deed. Steve has gotten some documents, but it's hard to get everything right now for the reason we just talked about. But it does appear at first blush that the trustees, and this is what Rick was referring to as well, in around 1961, it looks like the trustees did quit claim to Suffolk County some of the bottom land inside Northwest Creek. I wouldn't say that definitively yet, because I really want to see the entire, the deed picture. But we have a copy of a deed description. I've yet to see the whole deed, but it looks like there probably was a deed. We have maps done by Suffolk County. We have a letter from Bob Osborne, who at the time was the town attorney, and I gather was probably the trustee attorney as well. And pieced together at the moment, it looks like, because when you look at the Suffolk County tax map, this is something we were not expecting to find. We figured, Steve and I going in, that the Suffolk County tax map shows the county is owning some land inside the creek. And our belief was kind of like the east side of Napeague Harbor is, that must be wrong. But I have a feeling it may be different from the east side of Napeague Harbor, where I don't believe the trustees gave any rights to New York State. In this case, it appears it's quite possible the trustees did give a quitclaim deed to the bottom land in the creek.
Yeah, I think it's over by the mooring field primarily.
Yeah.
And that's been a subject of a lot of back and forth, and, who's going to administer what, but, it's moved along a little bit.
So those are the kinds of, but it sounds like the concerns here are what beaches and waterways in the Northwest area do the trustees own or not own? And what's the basis for those claims? And that's really what I want to get down to, is I'd like to refine our search a little bit so that we're really focused a little bit more specifically on those areas.
That should be our phase one anyway. And bring that to fruition. I think that would be a nice accomplishment, Rick. And then look ahead and see if there's further needs, or if there's other areas that warrant attention in the holding portfolio.
Right.
Agreed. I think that the once we're really certain, then should consider approaching Suffolk County the tax map creators and say, listen, this needs to be refined or adjusted, and see where that goes, because so many people reference those, obviously.
Yeah. Well, doesn't this kind of go right back to what we were talking, what has happened over the last year or two? I guess it was 2018 with the ownership of the Cartwright Shoal, and I think there's actually something just a smart project.
We lost you, Tim.
To just define what we don't know, and then ongoing litigation.
What did Tim say about Cartwright? Tim, we lost you there for a while.
Tim, you have to restart, buddy. I think we lost your whole transmission.
Sorry, I was just saying. I think with the recent challenges on the ownership of the shoal, is a perfect example of the importance of this work. And if we are, spend the time and money to really define what we own, I think that for future boards and future public, it'll be more defined. And I think this is a great project.
Well, this is the same approach as the Gardner's Island and Cartwright Shoals research was done. Same methodology. Bring it forward. And as far as Cartwright Shoals, going back to the Suffolk County tax maps, I believe they say state of New York, but they're just, those tax maps are just a reference, and they'd probably be the first to tell you, don't take them as gospel. I certainly wouldn't. So that's just it's kind of like a Hagstrom's map, which is even less gospel. But people get in trouble trusting maps. So, what we're doing is we're looking at written records and surveys, obviously, with that Northwest Creek, 75 acres of land underwater quitclaimed by the trustees to the Suffolk County Department of Public Works for the dredging. It included lands north of Stratton Beach out into Northwest Harbor, Stratton Beach itself, and south into Northwest Creek. That's what the DPW wanted, since that was their sphere of dredging work. I carefully checked that survey against the quitclaim deed, and they match up. The meets and bounds are exact. But I'm trying to get other maps as well, because right after that, in the 70s, early 70s, then Suffolk County came in for used eminent domain for parkland in the area. So one of the things I'm really interested in is trying to match up that dredging taking and compare it to and connect it to the eminent domain taking for the park, if it includes the beaches, land underwater. And that should be defined. And I would say on these tax maps and any other maps, they should be clearly delineated as to what's what. So if the 61 quitclaim was to DPW and that stands, then I feel that should be noted and exactly carefully delineated, comparing to every other parcel in there as well. And I think that we can help them with that.
I told Steve, I actually have seen the takings maps that the county did for Northwest Harbor County Park. That was around 1970. I think they were in the basement of Town Hall. I think that's where I saw them, but I don't have copies of them. And Steve has been really trying to track those down and get copies. They were very, very nice surveys, really detailed surveys. My recollection, though, is they did not take any trustee land. Those takings maps were really the meadows. Primarily, they were the meadows, and on the east side, of course, the county parkland goes right to Swamp Road. So it includes a lot of the adjoining woods. But I don't think the county in 1970 or 71 for the Northwest Harbor County Park acquired any or purported to acquire any trustee land. I was not aware of the 1961 deed, though. That was something of a surprise to see that area on the tax map being backed up by a deed. And Steve, I still haven't seen the entire original deed. Do you have the 61 deed?
Yeah, I sent you the meets and bounds of it.
I'd like to see. Where'd you get it from?
It was a Stuart Vorpal file.
The trustees have a copy of it?
They do, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. When I was there last week, Arlene made file available to me, and I went through the minutes of the trustees from the 50s through the 60s. Found a reference to it. And then some correspondence, which was very interesting. And I'll scan all that, share it. And
I'd like to see scans rather than the
yeah. I mean, as far as getting
shots.
Yeah, that map is big though. So I'll have to get another copy of that.
Yeah.
Hey, Rick, Chris Carrillo, and Steve, how you doing?
Hey, Chris, how are you?
Doing pretty well, thanks. Steve as well, but I was going to point this one to Rick for a little bit. Where I'm kind of looking at and where I'm seeing the future value here is going to be in the event jurisdiction is challenged or the dubious nature of any of these properties does come up in a legal setting and in the courtroom. So far we've seen some really nice outlines and roadmaps of where we're going with this. But can you guys talk a little bit to what the end product might look like and how, from a formatting perspective, we can possibly see, the sites or the copies of the deeds brought along, and things of that nature? Because where I see the value is being able to take this in the event we are challenged in the future and use this in a courtroom or in a setting. So what's the end product going to look like, and how can we steer it so that, that tangible value of, if we get challenged, we're going to be able to grab that and grab you guys and have a product that's going to help us out in the courtroom?
Right. Well, right now have probably 300 or 400 pages of carefully cited notations, tables. So as I was putting together this summary update, I was gleaning it from about 8 different working documents. So it's a lot, and it's ranged in to answer your question, table of contents format of topical. So for instance, conveyances, grantor, grantee, how they were given, all cited, indexes of names. As far as original deeds, have literally hundreds, if not more. But so you'll have a narrative telling the story, followed by, I guess we could call them glossaries of these tables, indexes, gazetteer of very specialized, focused localities within this area. And indexed helps because then if you know what you're looking for, you can go right to it. But since it's in electronic format, it's also keyword searchable. So every which way you will be able to retrieve it. But absolutely any suggestions you have as a user of this, potentially, please let us know and we'll fine tune it.
Let me add to that a bit more specific in terms of what I would see us having at the end of the day. Let's take a couple of examples. All right. So we're just talking about the beaches in the Sag Harbor area. We've talked about Little Northwest Creek and Northwest Creek. So there'll be differences in what we want to show vis-a-vis beaches and underwater lands. I think for beaches, and remember, first of all, these hundreds of deeds that Steve is talking about, these are deeds, generally speaking, that don't involve the trustees. They're private deeds. They're deeds to and from private people. They become relevant when they adjoin trustee property and make some reference either to the trustees as the adjoining owner, let's say the underwater land owner, but usually they won't say that. Usually if it's underwater land, it'll say it's bounded by such and such body of water. It was in most cases thought, what I would say, unnecessary or duplicative to state that, oh, by the way, the trustees own the body of water, because it was assumed everyone knew that. So when you're starting with the beaches, when we take beaches, first of all, I think the first most important document when it comes to beaches is if we can nail down the original allotments. All right. I'll give an example. The example is not a perfect example because we know the trustees got into litigation over it and they lost the litigation, even though today I think that litigation has sort of been overturned. And that is the beaches in the Grace Estate area on Northwest Harbor. Those original allotments are pretty well identified. You can identify them with relatively good clarity in the town records. And as Steve mentioned earlier, those records went to the cliff, meaning the cliff or the bluff, and not to the beach, and certainly not to the water of Northwest Harbor. In fact, that was exactly what the trustees claimed in the 1870s when they were fighting with Kirk. And what happened, the reason the trustees in the 1870s and 80s, and unfortunately what the court found at that time was that the boundary wasn't mobile. And so even though the trustees had retained ownership of the beach, in the intervening 150 years, the court assumed, the beach had eroded down into Northwest Harbor, and so the strip of land that the trustees retained was lost. It's a totally ludicrous decision. Why the heck did the court think the trustees retained the beach? They retained it for public access. Now, there's a court decision that you lost a few years ago, but just like you can get Pyrrhic victories, sometimes you can lose things and really win, and that was, I'm referring to the Macklow decision on the ocean. in which you went to the appellate division, and actually there was leave sought to go to the Court of Appeals. The bottom line is, although the trustees were on the other side of the issue, the court finding there was that the deeds, and that was a deed where it was bounded by the beach grass line on the ocean. The court found, yeah, you can have a mobile boundary. And if the parties, if there's evidence that the parties intended a mobile boundary, then that's how it should be looked at. I think when the trustees gave original allotments that went to the cliff or went to the beach as opposed to the bay, and generally speaking, they went to the beach or the cliff or the bluff, they meant a mobile boundary, meaning they wanted to retain ownership of the beach. So the first task, to my mind, is for us to try to find those original allotments, try to identify them. I don't know if we're always, and this is where Steve's magic comes in. We'll see whether we can do that. And then you can sort of try to see what happened in more modern deeds. Did at one point the landowner, was there a deed where, the deed, instead of going to the edge of the beach, and all of a sudden it went to the harbor or the bay, where they kind of usurped some of the trustee land, and then subsequent deeds have done the same thing. So that's, I think, what the original allotments and the deed history should show. If you're talking about interior waterways, remember, you won't have a deed, for example, to the trustees for Northwest Creek. The deed, so to speak, is the Dongan Patent. And the Dongan Patent is the entire town, except for Montauk. So the trustees are in this odd position where then most times they can't go back to the original deed and say, hey, see, here's our deed, that's how we own it. It didn't work that way. The trustees got all the land that was still owned in common in 1686. Remember, that wasn't all the land in the town, but there was still the bulk of it. And then they made their own allotments out afterwards. So there are some bodies of water that, like Northwest Creek, I think, where we know that the trustees own it. And actually the quitclaim deed to the county, if nothing else, if the quitclaim deed was valid, if nothing else, it does kind of show, hey, the trustees did own the rest of Northwest Creek, and they still do. Things like Little Northwest Creek, which is a narrower waterway, there I think we would be looking for modern deeds on either side that presumably are bounded by Little Northwest Creek, meaning that the water itself was not included in the conveyance. And if the water wasn't included in the conveyance, it's reasonable for us to assume that it was trustee bottomland. L.Y. Brook, and Steve and I still have work to do in this because he's told me he's got conflicting evidence. L.Y. Brook or Ellie Brook, I do know in the original conveyances in the 1730s, it appeared that the trustees were giving land without reference to the brook. In other words, they may have given land that included parts of Ellie Brook. But Steve has also told me he's found other conveyances later on, maybe private deeds, that only go to the brook. So, we still have to resolve that and see what we will find. But that's kind of what the evidence will be, Chris, I think at the end of the day. And, we want to be specifically focused on different sections of beach, different underwater land bodies. And we want to put forth the evidence that we have to show what rights the trustees might have. And just one more statement on that. A really thorny issue would be Northwest Harbor, Sag Harbor Bay. Who knows? We might even treat them differently. Steve and I have really not discussed this. We do know that in Sag Harbor Bay, there were underwater conveyances made by the town trustees, including to the state of New York for Long Wharf. So does that mean the trustees have a clear ownership of the bottom out in Northwest Bay, or much less Northwest Harbor? I wouldn't say that we have clear rights of ownership, but I also wouldn't, and this is sort of how we handled it back, when I was counsel. We also don't want to give up whatever rights we think we might have. And, there are, the evidence that there was some trustee ownership is these so-called, what they call them, Steve, the water lots.
Water lot, yeah.
Water lots off the beach in Sag Harbor. So certainly there were people back in the 1700s and the 1800s who thought that underwater land belonged to the trustees.
That help, Chris?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a great narrative. Thank you, guys.
Everything, like I said, everything very carefully cited. Have access to easy access to the actual document cited, so you could review it yourself, and ultimately cartographically as well. Because for all this, For me, that's probably the easiest way to make sense of it all.
Are you doing
Hey,
a
Steve, this is
cartography?
Rick. Hey, Steve.
Yeah.
You have gotten some of the early allotments, correct? I think you've referenced a few of them.
Oh yeah, that's the feel right now that have a really good grip on all of the original allotments and where they ran, which way, like the numbering system. I told Rick the other night, said finally was able to bring one of the original allotments forward and figure out what way the numbers went up and down the creek. So which helps. They didn't say it. So that's really a critical foundation, is plotting out all of those divisions. And Rick work on the 1700s divisions was a big help for me. It freed me up to really focus on the earlier, more confusing ones, like sporadically throughout Sag Harbor, which by the way, Sag Harbor was the most difficult area to work on because it seemed like it just gave, like they call them waste meadows, a section here and there. People were taking up land, probably without title. They changed the landscape there with filling in the marshlands. So that's a tricky one. But
Yeah, Sag Harbor's kind of messy.
So, but yeah, to answer your question, have a really good grip on the original allotment. So that's original title.
I'm reading this as you're speaking, and I have to say, it's just fascinating, the history. It really is very interesting, and it's loaded with history of our area and the names of the people and so forth. It's really a lot of work that you've done. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Listen, as far as interesting, you took the words out of my mouth. Last week, past couple of weeks working on the Northwest Creek part, reading up on the correspondence with the takings of the parkland to the southeast, Northwest County Park. And in it, the trustees had said, this is in the early 70s, trustees said, well, we think we have some upland ownership in there. And two very local individuals came forward saying, we have the title. The names were E. Cortland Mulford and Clifford T. Edwards. You don't get any more local than those two names. And it fascinated me because I don't know yet, but just so immersed in this work, knowing that those two names were original allottees in 1653. I'm curious if those lots just stayed in their family. It's interesting.
Anybody else?
All right. Well, I think we're finished, guys. So thanks for the update. Francis, do you want to say anything?
No, I mean, I think the work is great. Clearly, this is going to, once we get past this, it's going to be a many years project ahead of us. And hopefully any future boards will continue it.
Good thing we're all young.
Thanks a lot, Steve.
Okay, folks.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks all.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks for the
Thank
support.
you.
Thank you,
Thank you
guys.
so much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. Matt, anyone on the line?
You still have 0 callers, Francis. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, move on to new business. We have Accabonac and Georgica Committee. Okay, 2020 to 21 Phragmite Maintenance Permit Renewal Program. Do you have anything on that, Jim?
No, I haven't really had a chance. We've been getting some management reports and stuff in sporadically from some of the agents, but I think we do need to spend a little time and collate that and figure out exactly where we are with some of these. There's a couple properties that have some issues either with the village or with the town that I think would probably prevent us from moving ahead with any renewals until some of that stuff is sorted. But it's a pretty big, deep grab, and I haven't talked to Arlene about it at all. I don't know whether Rick, I don't know whether you have, and Susan, I don't know whether you've talked to Arlene about this.
Not yet, but it is Phragmites renewal season, and we should get together and get with Ben and visit a few properties.
All good.
Yeah, sounds good.
So if we can table this for the time being.
Okay. Records, we did website conversation. Old business. Okay, we need to discuss moving 3,500 cubic yards of sand at Louse Point for public beach nourishment in sand-starved areas further south. Bill?
Yeah, we have the permit to move 3,500 yards of sand. Istrian is able to do it. The one thing I want to do there is we really have to expand the area where we can place the spoil. And I was wondering if it would make sense to have our engineer perhaps put a request into the DEC to expand the area. We can put sand down to where down further south to include the whole area down to where the bulkheads start. We could get Drew Bennett to take care of that paperwork. And there's also some Army Corps of Engineers stuff that he would be useful to take care of for the culvert.
Anybody have any comments on hiring Drew to modify the permit?
I don't have a problem with that. Do we need a motion for that? I would think we do.
Yes.
Yeah, I would think so.
All right, I'd like to make a.
Should we get a proposal from them first so we know what we're voting on, rather than just an open-ended authorization?
We can. It's a modification. I can't imagine it's going to be outrageously expensive, but sure.
I'm just.
We'll see if we can get it for the next meeting. So we're okay to get the proposal, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think it's going to be a huge deal.
Is time of the essence here, Bill? Is this something we need to vet out now, or do we have some schedule ahead of us to work with?
Right now, we have permission to move 3,500 yards to the original boundaries of the thing. To do the job effectively, we really should, just have it open so we could move it further down the beach, have the whole beach open. There's
Right.
no way of telling what kind of erosion we're going to be facing in the future.
Hey, John, could we do some kind of an approval with a limit so that, we're going to kind of be protected and, be able to review things and get it moving? Because I just don't know if we're going to run out of time here on this one.
Whatever. I mean, I just posed the question. I wasn't sure.
Yeah. I mean, what's fair to say, like up to 5,000 we'd approve and subject to further review?
I think that's actually probably realistic and perhaps generous. I'd like to make a motion that we approve up to 5,000 in
I'll second that.
in engineering fees on this.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay.
Thanks, Rick.
Okay, so move down to kayaks and small boats on the beach. Yeah, I think this is in view of the sailboats that started to collect on the beach down at Last Point this year. I think we should start talking about how to deal with them and actually the town code that seems to allow it.
Well, Francis, this was also a result of a trip that Ben and I took around 3 Mile Harbor with a concerned citizen, showing us abandoned boats and structures along the beach. I just had a few pictures, just representative pictures of what's there, and I'd kind of like to tie the discussion of what to do about this with, as you say, what to do about small boats on the beach in general. And I know we formed a committee to look at this and maybe interact with the harbor masters several meetings ago. I'm not sure what's transpired on that, but I just thought this might restart that discussion.
Yeah. That kind of got kicked by the wayside with this Covis stuff.
Well, I think we also wanted to wait till the end of the season too to see which boats were abandoned and which were just people left there for the summer.
So is this picture on the screen?
I think it's coming. There it is.
So this is just there's only 7 or 8 pictures here, so don't get concerned. But this is just an example of, I think we saw some pictures earlier in the year along these lines. Examples of boats that are left on the beach, some of them intact, some of them abandoned. But in addition, there's quite a few properties that we noticed that built, their own kayak racks and various structures on the beach that probably we should address somehow. I mean, we give permission for staircases because they're landing on the beach, and these structures now seem to be popping up on the beach as well. And I know we haven't, at least I haven't seen any applications for them and permits for them.
Where's
Do
this
any
one,
of these
John?
things?
This
Would
is
these
along
things
this is on the
Lion-
this is on the west side of 3 Mile Harbor. This is probably somewhere in the vicinity of Duke Drive, south of Boyd Harbor.
Mm-hmm.
The earlier pictures were down along Oyster Shores, Oyster Pond. This is headed north now as the land begins to rise.
So these are being built by the homeowners themselves? People who live on with no permit? Is that right?
Evidently, I don't know. I mean, I just took the pictures. I didn't investigate the
Right.
background here.
But these aren't trustee racks, obviously.
No, these
No.
are private. These are private racks. And you can see here that, there's bins and things are appearing, and it looks like over here on the left side of the picture, someone's sort of done a jury rig bluff restoration log revetment type deal.
It's a waddle.
What's that?
It's a waddle.
What?
It's a waddle.
Waddle?
Yes.
Like a duck waddles?
No.
Oh, a waddle.
A turkey waddle?
No.
This is the
Fine. Go on.
the Duke dock. And one of the first things I came across as a trustee was an application for, wasn't a rebuild, but it was a sort of a restoration of the Duke dock, which just went away. And this is the Duke dock now. So I have a feeling
Didn't go away.
it's done on this dock without a permit.
John, is that fencing in the picture before? The fencing?
Wow.
Can you go back to the
Yeah,
picture that you just had up?
This one?
Yes, that is fencing, is it not?
No, it's bulkhead.
Up at the top,
Yeah, that's fencing.
on the grass.
Yeah.
That looks like wire fencing that they have at the airport where it has a lip so the deer can't jump over it.
I can't tell, maybe.
Yeah, it looks like
Private property.
Right, I'm just
that's
looking at,
upland property. Right?
Yeah.
Yep.
It's out of our jurisdiction.
no, I know, but I just was curious. It looks like airport fencing.
These are our racks. And the only reason I included this picture is that we took this trip on November 10th. And kayaks are supposed to be off the racks November 1st. So I think this is another thing that maybe the committee should think about. I wonder if, as if things continue climatologically as they have been, we might see a lot more interest in boating later in the season. Maybe this, boats off the beach, boats off the racks, November 1st date is something that should be revisited. Maybe we should think about allowing these things to stay on the racks a little bit longer.
Well, I think this year's a real exception all the way around. One, we've had the issues out here because of COVID. People are here, they're staying here, and it was combined with a very warm fall. Look at what we had a couple days ago. We had 65-degree weather and calm winds. It was an ideal day to go out kayaking or paddle boarding.
Well,
Just another example, a little platform built. This is farther to the north of Hands Creek. And again, the bench and kayaks, again, it seems to be, if we permit things to touch the quote unquote beach at the toe of the bluff, then I guess this probably is, anything beyond the toe of the bluff is in our jurisdiction, or we're considering it in our jurisdiction. And we should probably be aware of what's going on there and try to clean it up. So I thought in terms of this, Ben and I talked about this a little bit, that maybe in terms of 3 Mile Harbor anyway, it might not be a bad idea to get in touch with the harbor masters and take a trip around with them, show them what we see and discuss with them the issue of impounding these boats, or at least maybe notifying the homeowners that impounding their boats is imminent. But again, I just thought that this might be something that the larger committee might want to involve themselves in, or at least involve themselves in a similar way on the bay beaches. So there's some consistency about how we deal with these things town-wide. That's it. That's all I have.
okay.
I would just like to note, I sent a couple of emails out today or yesterday about Accabonac Harbor. I had attended the APC meeting and we discussed the kayak racks at Louse Point. Patrice Dalton, who's the president, will be coming to our next meeting and to talk about the kayak racks that are up there and various different topics I put in my email to you. There's also, Lauren Bolger had gone up to Landing Lane. There was some discussion about moving some of the kayak racks to Landing Lane. And I sent that email to you. So if you would kindly look at that before next week. She took it.
Susan, the problem with moving it to Landing Lane is it's not our land. So we can't just pick up and move over there.
No, I understand, but I'm letting you know that this is the topic that was discussed, and I wanted you to be aware of it. That's why I sent you the email. I actually thought Patrice was going to be at this meeting, so I gave you the heads up. Are
they talking about the new set of racks that we had put at Louse
Yes.
Point?
And then Jim moved them down.
Yes.
And
Yes, they don't want them to come back.
they don't want them at all. They don't want those racks, those particular racks that were moved. They don't want them at all. So
Well,
that is,
what I do feel unfortunate is we did have, Arlene and I actually met with the nature preserves, or some members of the nature preserve committee about this some time ago. And actually, if you read the management plan for Louse Point, it really doesn't appear that these racks would be allowed as part of that management plan. But one of the comments that was made by actually Rick Whalen was, those management plans were meant to be somewhat living documents, okay, that would be amended and adjusted over time. So I'm hoping that there's the opportunity for a little give and take here and some dialogue related to this before.
you're referring to the Norm Jacobs for Louse Point?
Pardon me?
You're referring to the Norm Jacobs?
That's
Norman
Norman Edwards, Susan.
Norman Edwards.
Norman Edwards. Okay, I have.
I'm referring to the management plan that was established on that. I think Norman Edwards may have had something to do with it. But, the feedback that I got, which to me was encouraging at the time, was that, when that management plan was written, first and foremost, the kayaks were not even considered, okay? Nor were paddle boards, nor were a lot of things. So, it seemed like there might be an opportunity to at least discuss this before some ultimate decision was rendered. Because to unilaterally just go, well, that's not allowed as part of the management plan. Well, the question becomes, who developed the management plan? Okay, it was done by committee. It could be amended by committee. And certainly we should welcome any sort of a input from the public as to other things that we could do. But, we had this discussion, and we've had it several times, where, personally, I'm one of those people that feels that if you have a kayak, you should cart it down when you want to use it and bring it back home when you're done using it, that it's not our responsibility to provide housing for said personal watercraft. But you know what? I also have to acquiesce to the wishes of others. And there's been a lot of people in the community that either are a little older or physically that would present sort of an issue or a hazard, which is how we came to put these kayak racks on the beach to begin with. And they are popular. And the alternative is, I think John did a great job of showing what the alternatives are, is these things find themselves scattered among the Spartina in that, and they're doing damage to the edges of our waterways. So, as we go forward with this, I think we do have to have an open give and take, and that this should not be something that is a mandate that's put to us by whether it be the Accabonac Harbor Protection Committee or the CAC or anybody. I think we should have an open dialogue on this.
Mm-hmm. Well, when Patrice comes next week, I just wanted to give you the heads up on that. And I agree with you. There are a lot of people that cannot lift a 30-pound kayak by themselves who are older. And originally when those were built, I believe last year, it was because the people requested that they be there. So,
well, Susan and the rest of the board, they were built based on demand. Okay.
Right.
We started out with the original, whatever it was, 2 or 4 kayak racks. We had so many more requests for available space on these that we added a couple more. We still had additional requests to open up additional kayak racks. And the irony was some of the very people that were recipients of that expanded availability were the ones complaining about the new kayak racks, which did make it a little bit awkward, but I think it does shine a light on how difficult it sometimes is to arrive at something that everybody can live with.
Right. The issue of landing lane, just so you know, when they brought this up, I did say that Nature Conservancy has signs posted on landing lane, as well as there are 2, Nature Sanctuary, which is the East Hampton Preservation, and also the Nature Conservancy, the signs are there, so that we would not have the authority to put racks there, even though that was a suggestion. So I just, again, I sent this email to you so that you could read it in advance. And then Patrice was going to come this evening, but has decided to wait until next week. So, it's as you say, Jim, compromise and, giving what the community wants, but also I feel like we've built them to accommodate people, and now they've decided that they don't want them. So it is a conundrum.
Yeah, but but Susan, we're listening to different factions of our community.
Mm-hmm.
And let's face it, there's everybody out there has an opinion, and we may not be able to make everybody happy, but our role here is to try and define the need and make sense out of it and accommodate it where we can.
Exactly. I agree.
Everybody's not going to be happy.
Jim, with respect to that management plan for Louse Point, the Nature Preserve Committee, my understanding, and maybe it may be wrong, that kayak racks were there before that management plan was written.
The management plan's fairly old, John. I have a copy of it.
Well, but I mean the original kayak racks along the beach.
I can't speak to that. I don't know how long the original kayak racks have honestly been there.
Bill, when did they first go in?
I
I think you know that.
I put them in when I was working as a senior harbor master, the first couple. That was over 20-something years ago.
I think that was before the Nature Preserve Committee.
Yeah, it was probably before Norman Edwards was on the thing. And they will put, the reason we put them in there is because people were piling up kayaks on the beach.
Right.
And kayaks were not as common as they are right now. I mean.
Right.
But
so I guess my point is, if that's the case, that management plan was written with the understanding that kayak racks were in place. Now, granted, they weren't upland.
Okay. Well, that's what, John, that's what happens now. If we try to accommodate these kayak racks, we've kind of come to the conclusion that there's really no place on our beach that's not going to conflict with the public's use now of the beach areas. So the question becomes, do we eliminate some of our kayak racks on a permanent basis, or do we relocate those kayak racks to a location that might not necessarily be on our property? I did broach that subject with Rick Whalen. We walked in and we walked through the issue. We went over the potential areas. And after reading the management plan, I was like, well, this seems like a dead deal. But, Rick was somewhat pragmatic about it and said, hey, we did that management plan. It's a living document. It's meant to be added to. It's meant to be adjusted. It's meant to meet the needs of the community and the interests of the public. So it could be looked at again. Now, it looks like watching some of the emails come across and some of the comments, it looks like there isn't a clear consensus within the Nature Preserve Committee, because I saw comments from some of the membership there that says, over my dead body, basically. And hey, we can talk about it.
Anybody else? Okay. We'll move on to the fuel spill at Town Dock at Gann Road. Is that Ben?
That's me.
That's John.
Yeah.
John went to the meeting, I think. Right, John?
Yeah. We had a meeting last week with David Lease, Ed Michaels, Tim Treadwell, David Brown, John Gilnicki. And basically John is revising the legislation for a code change to tighten up the regulations on fueling boats, particularly trucks accessing public docks. This is an allowable thing by all legal entities. There's some question of whether we could prohibit it or permit it ourselves. I didn't feel that that was really something that we could do, that the legal structure was in place, and including the trustees in the process of writing it and reviewing it would be the way to go. We talked about some things that some people suggested to me. Could we limit it to say an ebb tide? That didn't seem to be something that was really doable either. I think a lot of the discussion we had, and a lot of this comes from the harbor masters and their experience with fueling in general, fueling boats in general around town, is not necessarily just an issue of trucks and boats at public docks. That these issues of spillage are everywhere and kind of ubiquitous. That's their feeling. So, there was a lot of discussion around that, but bottom line is John is drafting some changes to the code language legislation. That I guess there was legislation proposed, I think it might have been 2011, that met with some resistance and was dropped. So this is kind of a revisiting of that and an updating of that language. And that draft document will come to us for our review before it goes to public hearing and town board vote. And the schedule for that, the proposed schedule is, one other thing, just incidentally, I think some questions came around, what's going on in Sag Harbor. Sag Harbor has banned fueling from the Long Wharf. So we did have a discussion about how I raised the question, has that driven boats from Sag Harbor to East Hampton to get fueled from Town Dock? And the harbor masters felt as though if that was in fact the case, it was very minor. And most of these boats are going, if they're over a certain size, they can't be fueled. They have to go to some, I forget what the rules and regulations are. They have to go to some approved facility, which isn't a truck off a dock. And a lot of the larger boats are, fueling up in ports along the way, Connecticut, Rhode Island, not necessarily overusing East Hampton's dock. So I think there'll be a draft of this out in December, and they'll try to schedule it for a hearing before the town board, or a discussion before the town board in a work session in January. So we should see this draft language when it comes out in sometime in December and be able to comment on it then.
Hey, John, do you have any idea what's in the current draft of this document, or do you know when it would be available for review?
I believe sometime next month, Rick, that, the updated draft. I don't have the 2011 version. I can ask David or John to send it to us if you'd like to see it.
It's probably worth taking a look at if it's available. That would be great. Thank you.
Is that all you have, John?
That's all.
All right. We'll move on to committee reports. Aquaculture, the 2021 Accabonac Harbor Mosquito Larvae Survey.
Okay. I met with Dr. Nicole Marr on Thursday, and I gave her a virtual tour of Accabonac Harbor in the 2 polygons that I and Edwina Von Gaal work on. And she had aerial maps and views and so forth. So we spent about, I don't know, 3 hours or more on the salt marsh together, and showing her my photographs that I have taken over the time to show her the differences in what's gone on with the various different hotspots and the outside area of the salt marsh, where, although flooded, often very, if any, mosquito larvae have been found. So it was a real learning experience, as I always have when I meet with her and talk with her. She has reached out to the Peconic Estuary Partnership to ask if she would like to be, I think her name is John, what is the, Elizabeth Holstein, is that her name? Yes, Elizabeth?
Yeah, she's the DC representative.
Okay, to see if she wants to join us on December 17th. I've scheduled a meeting from 2 to 4 p.m. and that will be a Zoom meeting for all the people who have been connected to this project. That includes Tom Iwaneko from Suffolk County Vector, Dr. Nicole Marr, Bridget Fleming, various people from our planning department, Department of Natural Resources, Bill, John, myself. And Nicole seems to feel that, as I said last time we met, that the mosquito larvae water sampling should continue so that we continue to monitor and to give more data to see how the salt marsh has progressed, changed. And she said that right now, Tom Iwaneko, Vector, is interested in, on the map, and I don't have the map right here, but section number 3, number 9, and number 5 are the areas that he is considering to start to do some work should we get this program underway. The less intense areas are section 1, 2, and 10. And John and Bill, I'll send you the map of these areas. I just have to get it from Nicole. Area number 10 seems to have the least amount of mosquito larvae. That's the southern section of the harbor, Old Stone Highway. And then in front of Edwina's home, where we end up finishing our walk, which used to be 3.5 miles. Now it's less, but that's less intense. And the area of number 1 is Merrill Lake Preserve, and there's a private homeowner. What Nicole is going to see if she can find out is what areas of the salt marsh are actually owned by the Nature Conservancy. And if so, that will help her become more involved with the project. If it's private homeowners, we have to identify that and, decide what to do from there, because it then becomes an open, who's going to take charge of the program going forward. And it would seem to me, although we'll discuss this when we meet December 17th, who should be the lead agency if it's not going to be the Nature Conservancy, which at this moment, it seems, we're sort of all up in the air about who will take over. And so that is December 17th from 2 to 4 p.m. by Zoom. Everybody should have gotten a link that was on that list. And what else from that? I think everyone has received the review of Accabonac community larva dipping data. I sent that on to you. That came from Nicole. And so I'm looking forward to seeing how we're going forward at this juncture. And obviously raising the funds to have this project completed or at least started is up in the air as well. But so that is that for now.
Yeah, I'd just like to chime in a little bit, Susan, on this. It's been kind of frustrating that we're year after year, basically gathering the same data. And I understand a long data set is a valuable thing, but I'd like to see at this meeting a little more discussion of, I was happy to see the 10 spots identified by Tom that are, the general hotspot areas and areas that look like they should be considered, and then his prioritization of those 10 spots.
Mhm.
But I think, the people who've done these surveys for the last 3 years, and looks like we'll be doing another one this year, have a lot of other knowledge that they've accumulated along the way, like the conditions under which they're finding these larvae. And, this was our original goal when we set out on this, was to find out where they were breeding, find out what the reasons are they seem to be breeding there, and move towards rectifying those conditions if that's possible.
Right.
And I think, and I'm going to try to do it on some of the sectors I've worked on before the December meeting, so I can, bring it in there saying, look, here's the hot spots, but here's why we see that they're hot spots. There's a berm here. There's a 100-year-old fence line that's built up and is blocking water. Or there's a ditch that the spoil was thrown to one side and it doesn't let that side of the marsh drain back into the ditch. And that's why there's mosquitoes here. These are the kinds of things that, is of value, I think. The people who've been working on the march are giving value to these observations as well as just counting larvae. And I think we should probably be identifying that a little bit more as we go along as well.
Well, when I presented the photographs to Nicole, she was able to discuss just those issues. Seeing, for instance, the ditches, the deep ditches of water that are in my polygon that never have any mosquito larvae at all, or the berms that have created a problem where the water is not able to go back out. That was definitely part of our discussion. And I think that we'll explore more of what you're asking about and want to confirm when we have our meeting. December 17th, but those are precisely the things that Nicole and I discussed, and she pointed out why things, why there would not be mosquito larvae further out toward the water, why the berms had impact. She discussed the coastal resilience, water conveyance, access and adequacy of the salt marsh as it is. We discussed a lot of various different things that I did take copious notes on, but I think all of those things should be covered and will be covered. And I understand we're supplying data that is seemingly, it's become more, it hasn't changed that much. There is one area, a hotspot that I showed her photographs of where it had completely been saturated in the very first year we did this. And then the next year there was growth that had come in. And last year, all of that growth had died off. And you can see a definite circle, but you also saw dry patches where there were dead fish, little small dead fish that had just not been able to survive because of the heat. So I think, have you taken pictures of your tour when you do your polygons, John?
I've taken some, yeah.
All right, if you could maybe, when we have our meeting, maybe identify those. And
well, what I thought would be more valuable actually was to get an aerial photograph and zoom it in with our knowledge of our walks. And
that's what we did.
Nose on the ground. But some stuff you can see, some stuff you can't see. Some stuff you can't see on an aerial that you can see on a walk. And I thought it would be useful for us to, just circle an area, say, this is a fence line that's become a berm. This is a pond in the middle of a wooded little knoll out on the marsh that you can't see in an aerial.
Right. Well, that's what we did.
Those things. Circle it, say this is a pond, this is a hot spot, this could be filled in, or this could be regraded, or this could be punched, a hole could be punched through this fence line so the marsh can be drained behind it. I'm just saying, from our perspective. You
No.
know, Nicole and Tom can make the final decisions. They're going to make the final plan, obviously.
Well, that's why what I did with Nicole on Thursday was very specific, inch by inch, from the beginning of our walk all the way around the harbor. I took her all along the path, and we had two different maps going at once where she was able to, we could hone right into the specific area that my picture was depicting. So we did do that, and I think that your polygon should be whatever photographs you have, and maybe we can get those from Mike if he's taken some pictures. I think it's very helpful, but that's precisely what I did with Nicole, the virtual walk. And it was very helpful to her so that she could see exactly where things were. I've also offered to take anybody on the walk in my polygon who really would like to see firsthand what we are seeing every summer. I don't know if you'd like to do the same at some juncture, perhaps before we start with the mosquito larvae water sampling, if that's what we're going to do. Right now, Nicole has said that she thinks it should continue. We'll see what everybody else.
I'd like to see it move forward with a little remediation work, even if it's just a little, just to keep everybody's interest.
Right. Well, I think that's the goal. I mean, I remember Tom saying that 2 years ago when we met with the legislators and we presented before them with Tom. He was of the mind that we start to, put our direction in that way. So I'm anxious to get it started too, because I do think, 3 years is a nice time that we've spent doing this. And but I do think monitoring it is important as well, so that we continue to have some sort of continued history that we can supply information to Vector with. But anyway, that's where we are. It's a big project ahead of us, and there's a lot of work to be done still. But I just want to get this started myself, because if we do need people for next summer, I think we have our core basic group from last year, and that may be all we need. Because I don't know how, what rules and regulations we will have in place due to the pandemic. And we did fine last year with just 6 of us. So anyway, that's it for the Acaponic Harbor for the moment.
Okay, did that include the salt marsh discussion?
But I hope.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And Conic Estuary report.
I think Arlene snuck that on there for me there. I did go to a technical advisory committee meeting last week, and most of the meeting was taken up with a presentation by Steve Tettelbach from Cornell and Long Island University, and Bassam Alam from the Stony Brook Marine Animal Disease Laboratory on the scallop die-off. I think most of us have heard about this before, but the consensus was last year's die-off and this past year's die-off were both related to high temperatures, which drove down oxygen levels at a time that coincided with the scallop spawning, and caused the die-off because the scallops were just expending too much energy, spawning under low oxygen conditions. Then there was also disease parasites found in scallops that had never been found before, but Bassam felt as though that those could have been opportunistically implanted, if you will, in the scallops as a result of the stress that they were under by the high temperature, low dissolved oxygen. There's also been increasing reports of cow nose rays appearing in the bays. There were apparently some sightings of cow nose rays in 3 Mile Harbor this summer, and Steve felt as though that may have been also a contributing factor. And one piece of evidence he gave for that is that when he does his survey dives, they'll count what he calls cluckers, which is a dead shellfish with the two valves connected, not a single shell. And they often find that's indication of a recently dead shellfish, whether it's a scallop or clam, oyster. And this year they often find them. They note them, so they have a category for cluckers in their surveys. This year they found absolutely none in their late summer sampling. So he feels that may have been another sign that the cow-nose rays were actually devouring the weakened scallop population. The cow-nose rays have very robust mouth parts that crush the shell into almost dust as they consume it. So that took up most of the meeting, and that was kind of the takeaway from that meeting. So that's it for that.
So John, basically the biggest takeaway from this meeting is the greatest challenge to our scallop population is higher water temperature and lack of good cover in the form of eelgrass.
Well, it's more high water temperature, which causes low oxygen levels, which stresses whatever's there. And then when you combine it with the spawning cycles, and he showed data that showed a correlation between a spawn, which they can determine when a spawn took place by doing a condition index of the oyster gonad. So when the oyster gonad's plump, it weighs a certain thing. When it spawns, the gonad loses weight. So when they do condition index, they can determine when a spawn took place by, they do condition index sort of every week or every 2 weeks. So they get a picture of what the weight of the gonad is. And when it peaks up and then drops off, that indicates a spawn. So they correlated the spawns with the temperature spikes. So that's why they feel as though it's, the driving force is high temperature, which causes dissolved oxygen, low dissolved oxygen, and which unfortunately is coinciding with the spawning cycle of the scallop.
So it's a little like having sex under the covers when everybody starts to run out of air.
Good analogy, Jim. That's it.
With a little
I was
strangulation.
waiting for something.
Add a little strangulation in there, and then you're getting really close to it,
Wasn't going there, Mike. That's creepy town.
All right, Georgia Pond.
Okay. The bid packages are like all out. We've had some bidders collect those packages or call in on them already. The pond cut, I believe, is still open. I haven't been down there in a couple of days, but when I was down there 2 days ago, it was still flowing pretty nice. And hopefully we'll be awarding the contract to the successful bidder here shortly. I think the bid opening is December 7th. That was a question.
Oh, I believe it is.
All right, thank you. And we'll move on from there. We're still, as an update on Georgia Pond, we did have a discussion the other day between myself and Sarah and Will Bowman and Larry related to the permits for the algae harvester. And we're very much hopeful that we can get that on track and that those permits could be issued for this coming season, because we all recognize, much like John already iterated, the challenge that higher water temperatures put on these water bodies. And in the case of Georgia Pond, those warmer water temperatures and the nitrogen levels create the situation for the harmful algal blooms that we're all trying to avoid here.
Is the pond still open? Jim?
Yes, I as of 2 days ago it was.
Oh,
I
cool.
went down there today. It looked like it was still.
Yeah.
Great.
Jim, what has Georgia Cove added to the dredging bid mean? Does that mean they're going to dig sand over closer?
No, you know what that is this is a request coming from the Friends of Georgia, and I agree with it. When we did the dredging the first year, it is in the maintenance permit to take an additional 900 yards per event out of that south end of Georgia Cove, which will improve the tidal letting of Georgia Cove in general. So we've added that this year. I got to be honest, it's one of those areas that the gain for the effort to get it for the 900 yards, depending on moon and what the level of the ultimate pond is, that can be easier, a real pain in the butt to get to. But we're hopeful that the successful contractor will be willing to take that additional sand. I think there's a pretty good opportunity for whoever the contractor is this year. There's a lot of properties that really do need the sand this year. So I think that should be pretty easy to coerce somebody into that.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Harbor management, fresh pond dredging.
I think we're waiting for the same thing. Our bid opening is the same day for Fresh Pond.
Okay. Roads Committee, 163 Atlantic Avenue. Anybody get down there to look at it?
Yeah.
I did.
I looked at the maps. I've been there, yes.
Okay.
I'm having a problem with it personally.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not all the way there on it yet, and I don't know if we need to have a committee discussion on this and vet it out a little further. But it seems like a big ask when there's a lot of road frontage.
Well, the only problem there, guys, is if you actually look at that road frontage is a little deceptive in the sense that you really can't, you have to elevate the septic. I understand how they came to come to us. Both of those properties presently have an elevated standard septic system. Okay, that's what they needed to get, their original permits. Okay, so the containment there is 3.5, 4 foot above the natural grade, and when you go through the permitting process, that road bed area, which is the area between the actual pavement and those elevated septic system, is considered basically by planning a natural feature that they want the minimal disturbance on. So the opportunity to enlarge your parking, I don't really think exists.
One of my problems is, you created a plan that's in their advantage and then came to us for the access they're looking for. They have a driveway, they're keeping a driveway. They just don't, they don't have the desire to use that driveway for both residences.
Well, the problem, John, if you actually look at that driveway, pace it out, there is no opportunity because of the concrete walls that are presently there. There's no opportunity to enlarge that driveway to accommodate the parking. I think in reality, you have room for about 2.5 cars on that existing parking that services a guest cottage and a residence.
And that was on one property to begin with.
And that was on one property to begin with. They're retiring the driveway and parking from the southerly residence because they have to, because
But they're also eliminating the residents. So
they're
it's,
also eliminating the residents. But, you know, I understood the logic here in that the only real access is more or less, I guess they probably could come back, John, and ask for a driveway that parallels the trustee road. Okay, so we'd be like stacked flags, so they wouldn't need trustee access. But you know, from a planning and design standpoint, if you want to see how bad that looks, all you need to do is drive around Northwest.
I agree. I agree with you totally on that.
You look at those properties that were developed back in the 90s and the early 2000s, where everybody had that 20-foot flag leading 500 feet into their property or more. And instead of doing something that was logical, which would have been sharing one access and splitting off of that, no. What everybody did is they listened to their attorneys and said, hey, you don't want to compromise access here. So what you do is everybody runs their 20-foot access down. And you know what? It makes for a pretty ugly situation.
Hey Jim.
Agree.
Hey Jim, last time we were talking about this, one of the points I had brought up was the non-parking of work vehicles and such on the trustee road, as it does provide access to another house, and it's pretty small. And, you know, maybe a couple of other, you know, considerations.
Well, you know,
is there anything that kind of outlines some of that stuff that, you know, gives us a little more substance?
Well, there isn't, but you know what does happen, and I can't speak to this application at all. I don't know whether it's gone far enough down the pipe, but one of the things that the plan, you know, that the ZBA has been doing, and somewhat routinely, is on these properties, and this is a good example, a property that clearly there is zero accommodation for construction vehicles during the process to really to park on the property and work on the property, is they require the applicants to put together a construction protocol that outlines, okay, how are you going to do this? Okay, we recognize that you got numerous trades who are going to be on this property at any given time. How are you going to do this via minimally impacting the public's use of public property and or private neighbors' ability to access and utilize their property? And usually what it is you've made some written arrangements, perhaps even with the East Hampton Town Trustees in the off season, to use some of that Atlantic Beach parking lot. But it's there, it's established, there's metes and bounds as far as the time that can be utilized. You know, a lot of these construction projects, everybody recognizes that they drag on through our, I'm going to say our tourist season or our warm weather season. And there's sort of D-days when you have to be out of these areas, just so we don't have negatively impact the public, which certainly should be a concern of ours. But the way that's been typically managed has been through the ZBA process. But I don't see any reason, Rick, why if we were going to consider this, that we wouldn't, I don't think we'd be out of line to condition this on a protocol for exactly the same reasons here.
I have one
Yeah, I mean, I
basic
could get more
question.
comfortable with it when it's like that.
Is that actually a trustee road, or is it an easement that was granted to the homeowner on the dune to run a access along the edge of the trustee property?
Hey, Francis, I think it was
That sounds
actually
like
an easement that was granted, because if it
Okay,
wasn't-
so we're talking about a driveway. We're
Yeah,
not talking about a road. So where is the problem with sharing that easement?
well,
I mean, from our end.
that's where, I'm going to be honest, guys, that's where I was at with this. But, you know, we're a board. It's really up
No,
to us.
I think we should investigate what that road really is before we make a decision.
All right.
Well, the question that I would have in regard to that point is, if we were asked by that house to give an easement to go on to, come along all the way along the back of trustee property to access that house, would we give it today? I mean, and if the argument for giving this driveway is, well, there's already one there. I mean, it's just kind of I don't know. I can't get it out of my head that it's a whittling away of.
Yeah, but the only thing here, John, is the question I have for you is, in terms of the whittling away, describe to me where we would in this particular situation, how we would be asked to enlarge upon that use.
What do you mean?
Where's the other property that's going to ask for access or an easement onto this driveway?
I'm talking about a whittling away of the public, our lands and trusts for the public in general.
Well,
an exclusive private benefit.
Yeah, I don't know. We have always and traditionally, it's what the trustees did. One of our roles was to provide, not public. One of our roles was to provide to prevent a situation where a landowner could landlock his neighbor and extort something out of them. And this here, if it's a road, it's one thing. If it's an easement, it's somewhat similar. We got to ask whether we think this is a sort of benign use. I think it's easy to write requirements here that all maintenance is borne upon these two holders of easements. It does not affect or fall back on the public. We can write into this the limits to which that access can ever be improved. I look at sometimes these situations as opportunities to clean up and better define these access easements so that someday we don't come down there and find that there's 2 inches of asphalt that runs from Atlantic Avenue to that house in the back.
Well, I agree, but you can design that property any way they want to. And
that's not true. You can. I think the carrot for the town and the ZBA here is you presently have a situation where you have two conventional septic systems that are legal and legitimate and current in a low-lying area. There is the opportunity to reduce that down to one IA system and essentially sterilize a lot. Once these lots are combined, game's over. They can never try and subdivide or revisit this.
The way I read those plans was the septic system in the cottage stays. I don't know. That's my assumption.
Well, the septic system in the cottage could very well stay, but the proposal is to take the septic system on I'm going to say the new house, which really is the house to the north. That would be upgraded to an IA system. The existing septic system for I believe it's 163, the property to the south, would be removed.
Yeah, to me, this looks like we gain a public benefit, and there's going to be no change to the easement. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the existing easements are well defined. Some of them have room for improvement. Chris and I have revisited some of the easements. We've talked about issuing new easements. We have provided private benefit through easements for quite some time. So it's not out of character with the trustees' charter. but I think it has to be more carefully looked at today. And this is such an important property right near a large public beach that it does require our due diligence, but it's not out of line.
All right, so where do we go from here? Want to sleep on it?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to table it, but if the applicant wants to put together a conditions document, or if Chris could recommend a path forward, so we at least start to understand what these guidelines could look like. Because I'm still a little, unclear. I think Jim did a good job of introducing this point, but I think at some point someone's got to take the lead on this and put something together for us to look at.
How much of the road do they really need, Jim? Is it 50 feet, 100 feet?
No, they don't need it. Well, I mean,
Not much.
From
They're close to the road with their access.
From Atlantic Avenue back to the parking area, I think is roughly 100 feet, I'm going to say.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and, what they've described there is not going to change that, is not going to change that access out to Atlantic Avenue at all.
And do we want that access to stay in the type of condition that it's in, or do we want them to continue to maintain it? Does it need maintenance, or do we prefer to sit?
I think we want to continue to maintain it in a capacity that it's accessible to the residents of the two houses and or any emergency vehicles in the event of a fire or an ambulance call or that.
Do they want
and
to
or
maintain the whole
access to the
thing?
Atlantic parking lot.
What's that?
And or access to the Atlantic Avenue parking lot. I think it provides a rear access point.
No, I don't think it does, Rick.
Well, it doesn't.
I drove down there, I couldn't see any way to get into the park.
No, it doesn't connect at all. There's
There's some
tight
brush.
wooded and-
There's a kind of a brush line between this access and the grassy portion of that parking lot.
Yeah, you can see that. You can see the stored lifeguard chairs, but you can't get through there.
Yeah, it's kind of low lying there too. Where it's closest to the parking lot, it's kind of low lying.
Question, does this set a precedence for us giving away a trustee road? And I think I heard someone say they're not even sure it's a trustee road.
It wouldn't, Susan, if it were a road, we routinely give easements onto a trustee road, because if we did not,
They wouldn't have access to their home.
they wouldn't have access to their property. Okay.
I believe we have a copy of the easement in the office from the owner. I could forward it to Chris Carrillo and.
Yeah, that'd be great, Arlene.
Yeah.
I mean, look, guys, if we're at the point where we want to see some easement language and conditions, then I'm happy to work on that, but I'm not sure we're at that point yet. Maybe we do need to hear from the homeowner on what they're willing to do, and as far as maintenance, I don't know. But you guys tell me. Happy to work up easement if that's what we're ready for.
Chris,
Jim, did you say, I'm sorry, did you say, Jim, that it's 50 feet, approximately 50 feet of the road that they're asking for an easement?
well, I'm saying from edge of pavement on Atlantic Avenue to the entrance to their proposed parking area is probably roughly 100 feet. Might be a little bit more.
It's pretty short.
Susan, to simplify it, there's one homeowner and one property all the way down at the end that have access to the whole road.
Right.
There's one other possible property that could use it for only about 100 feet. So there's really no opportunity for any further use by anybody else.
Right. No, I've driven down to the house on the beach and everything. I took the road.
Yeah. Hey, Chris, maybe the most productive way of sort of moving this along one way or the other is to have the applicant's counsel contact you and hash out a proposal. And maybe that's something that we could respond or react to at our next meeting.
I'd like to ask you a question, Chris. One of my concerns I brought up last time was there are some houses along the adjacent road to the west. I think it's Beach Road or something like that.
It's Beach Avenue. And
Beach
John,
Avenue. It's close. Their property lines are pretty close to this
not even.
easement road. And my concern is, would they ask? Now, Francis told me that they can't do that because they have to take access off
Correct.
Avenue because that's their address. Is that a legal requirement? Or could they ask for access into the back of their property from our easement?
John, anybody can ask anything.
Yeah,
What
they
could
never
we
change
do
their
on
address.
the basis that it's not an I don't know.
There's no
That
public
would-
Have to
road
take
for them to
access
change their
off
address.
Beach Avenue.
That would be written into the stipulations that Chris would, and counsel for the homeowner would agree to, right, Chris?
It's not even that. It's that they could come to us and ask, and this board could sit there and say, no chance. You have access to a public road already. And that's that. So there's really no precedent there. They have a public
But that-
road and this is
but-
not a
Right,
public
but you could be, but that
But
could be
that's what we're
written
doing.
into,
That's what we're doing to this property. They already have an access. We're granting them a more convenient access.
We're granting them a more convenient access in exchange for some
new septic.
things that are good for the public.
Well, it's not something, hey,
What's
listen,
good for
guys,
the public?
the reality here is we are not the recipient per se of any of the benefits here. The environment could be considered a recipient here. But to me, this is more a case of practical design. I'm going to be honest, guys, I was the first one to kind of say, nah, I don't think I want to go along with this. But when you looked at it, to me, it does make sense. And, John, I'm just looking at the aerial of that, that access drive. And yeah, there's two houses that I guess if the neighbors wanted to trespass and go through a dune and violate their natural resources special permit, they might be able to get access to this easement. But you know what? In a practical sense, I can't even consider.
I don't know, Jim.
That would
One of
occur where
one of those properties looks like their lawn comes to within 10 or 15 feet of that easement. And I wouldn't be surprised if that lawn goes over their property line onto trustee property.
Well, it could, but you know what? The reality here is, I'm going to ask this board: would there ever be a situation where you would consider giving somebody access through there? And you know what? I'm not even thinking in terms of driveway access. I'm thinking in terms of I need to replace my septic system. I need to do something. I need some sort of temporary construction access. And I'm looking at it and say, I can't imagine granting that.
I can see more a temporary access for a specific need that
That's what I'm talking
they
about.
couldn't meet otherwise than basically a permanent access because of a desired site plan. Look, I don't want to, be the fly in the ointment here. I'll make my own decision, but.
All right.
Well, let's see what their council comes up with and as far as a proposal and you guys can consider it and go from there.
Sounds good.
Chris,
Okay.
elimination of the septic systems. I don't know if you guys can hear me.
No, we can't hear you, Tim.
Try again.
I'd just like to see a clarification of the elimination of one of the septic systems as a benefit to the public. If
Well,
that's
That's what I said. Tim, I didn't describe it as a benefit to the public. It's more of an environmental benefit, and it's a carrot per se that you're waving here at this time and saying, and apparently the ZBA seemed to be biting on that carrot, which is really what precipitated them coming to us.
But the reality is, with the type of construction they're doing, it's mandated that they replace that septic system. So
yes,
Any new construction.
but it's not mandated that they knock a house down.
no, it's not.
Okay.
Or abandon one of the two. So it's in the public's favor for them to just put one in. That's compliant.
And I also think, since that's such a busy road, especially seasonally, I think that a plan for construction parking might be worth looking at.
I think also because it's such a busy road that it'd be safer to have the driveway off the easement than cars backing right out into Atlantic Ave.
Well, that's the way both of those driveways are at right now. They're very dysfunctional. I'm going to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
Point.
Yeah, I think coming with the easement makes more sense in totality of the situation.
All right, so we're going to continue this at the next meeting and hopefully get some conditions together.
Sounds good.
Yep.
All right. Anything new on Town Line Road, Merchants Path?
Well, yes, Francis. Personally, I've kind of come to a decision that southern section from Merchants Path down to Industrial Road may have to be at least temporarily gated. The amount of pollution, litter, and just general damage to the natural landscape, as John pointed out, with the tree stump dumping and doing a cleanup's great, but without having some control over the access, I think we're going to find ourselves back in the same situation. I believe there have been some cleanups done in the area previously, but there's definitely a lot of stuff there now. So I'd like to put together a resolution for procuring 2 gates, 14-foot width, and having them installed with, combination lock codes to be given to first responders for access, and see if we can clean the area up and see what the response is from the public. There were several requests for the other section to the north, but the dumping and damage to the area doesn't seem to be as egregious there. And I think we should have to be very measured in doing this, so it's something we can look after and see how it progresses in the future. But I think our next meeting may be our last meeting of the year, and it's something that we should probably do in the off season, January or February. So if anyone would like to talk about that further now or at the next meeting, that's kind of where I'm at with that issue after a lot of reflection and a lot of research.
Might I suggest we reach out to the East Hampton Fire Department and see what they would prefer on as far as a lack on that?
Of course, sure, Francis.
Rick, I have a question. I'm not opposed to this. I think that it would be a good thing, as you say, temporarily, at least to be able to clean up the place, have some restriction where people are not using that road. And certainly cleaning up is paramount, and getting rid of the fire pit that's there and all the debris. But I'm wondering if people will, if they find those gates locked, they would just head up to Sag Harbor and come back down from the north. Is there something that we should think about, maybe protecting the northern entrance as well?
Yeah, both sides. From Merchants Path would be one, and an Industrial Road would be the other. So
You're referring to get access through Mount Misery area, a little west of there? Is that what you're saying?
Well, it's
Yeah, that
Town Line Road.
We went all the way up to Sag
where it
Harbor.
intersects with Merchants Path. going south to where it intersects with Industrial Road. It's the southern section of Town Line Road that's unpaved.
Well, it was unpaved all the way to Sag Harbor, so I'm suggesting that the entrance in Sag Harbor in the north would then be open if people decide,
Yeah,
okay,
no,
fine.
yes, that whole section, Susan, would be open, correct.
Okay.
I don't remember specifically what it looks like at the point you're talking about, Rick, but I do remember that in that general area, there were a lot of sections of that road that were fairly wide.
Mhm.
Trucks had gone around and cut corners and things like that. I mean, presumably, if we're going to put a fence up there, a gate up there, we're going to be limited to what we consider our ownership of the road. Is that going to be wide enough, or can a truck just go right around it?
Well, you know, roads are about 53 or 55 feet wide. So there is some, you know, area to work with. And is it possible people will go around the gates? Yes, it is. You know, there are times when the gates on the Grace Estate are locked. It hasn't been often lately, but there's been no bushwhacking, so to speak, to go around those gates. And there was, I think, a gate that's closed down at the end of the Trustee Road by Northwest Creek that goes through Barcelona Neck. I don't think that one's been driven around, but there is access to the other side. So it's a tough question, John. I don't know if we're going to get away from that, you know, damaging landscape there that's just getting scarred by irresponsible people unless we try to curtail the use for a while and see if we can get some type of a handle on it.
Hey, Rick, Town Line Road south that goes down to the beach. That road is though actually split in half between Sagaponic and East Hampton. Are
Correct.
we sure that the dirt road is not a similar situation?
I believe it's even marked on the county tax map as the East Hampton Town Trustee Road.
Okay.
But you know, we could maybe do a quick check-in with Rick as well, or Steve, and just have them do a quick look. I think that's listed on Rick's inventory of roads.
Okay.
From his prior project.
Hey, Rick, how long would you want to close these roads down for?
You know, that's really, I guess, a decision for you know, the board next year and going forward. You know, I'd say you'd have to do it for at least 6 months to get it cleaned up and see what the response is.
What do you think about getting the cooperation of some law enforcement entity? Because I wouldn't be surprised if, as soon as a gate goes up, it's going to enrage some people and they're going to want to just tear it down. At least,
yeah, that's very possible.
For a while.
You know, the only challenge is, you know, I think, you know, a lot of our law enforcement is, you know, they're pretty busy. We have a bigger population now, so, you know, I'm hoping we don't add too much stress to everyone. And if, at the end of the day, you know, everyone on the board thinks that we're going too quick on this, that's fine too. And I'm more than happy to go and do a cleanup. You know, there is some actual landscaping that needs to be done to correct the road where the stumps are. And, you know, there's the fire pit. So, you know, there's a few projects there that are somewhat substantial and I would think would cost at least a few $1,000s each to rectify, as well as the time and effort to do a general cleanup of the shoulders of the road and the nearby area. So, you know, is that worth gating off the road, or do you do the cleanup and do some signage, which was the previous discussion, and kind of hope for the best?
I think it's worth gating off the road with the intent to do a serious cleanup there, instead of just closing it off to the public. That would just be a good use of gating the road and then giving us time to come up with a plan to really do a thorough cleanup job. And then maybe we could put some trail cams up and some signs as well.
I'm still concerned about the northern entry. Though. When people are turned away from the southern entry, they'll just go right up to the north and come back down and dump whatever they want to dump in the fire pit and the log area that all those
So
logs.
you're saying you're just going to move the problem, Susan?
Sorry?
Are you saying that you were just going to move the problem to the other section of the road?
I'm concerned that if we lock one side off, that people who know that road will say, all right, fine, I'll enter from Sag Harbor.
No, Susan, we're talking about blocking off both entrances of one section.
You're talking about Industrial Road and the lower section, but I'm talking about when you drive all the way up to Sag Harbor, you can come down from Sag Harbor.
Right, I understand that.
You hit the fence, till you hit the gate.
There's going to be another gate there.
Oh, there is?
Halfway
All
up
right.
the road. Yeah,
Okay.
at Merchant's Path. At the
Okay.
Merchant's Path intersection. But it's not going to be the whole road. Some of the road will be open. The
Okay.
other section down by Sag Harbor.
Okay.
So.
And then legally, do we have the authority to put up some gates
Yes.
on these roads?
Yes, we own.
Well, that's a question for council, perhaps. We haven't really. Well, yeah, I mean, there are gates up on the Grace Estate roads, which are trustee roads, and there's joint management plans for those roads.
Short answer is yes, I believe we do, Ben.
Okay,
for our roads.
thank you.
Have you talked to Steve Lynch or anybody who might?
I've put a couple of calls in. I haven't gotten any calls back with anyone saying don't do it, but I haven't gotten any calls back at all.
Well, I'm thinking more in terms of a cleanup. I mean, it's going to need machinery and dump trucks, and we're not going to do it.
Yeah, well, it's not the town's road, and my previous efforts to ask for resources, I believe the answer was it has to be done by a town board motion or resolution.
Well, I would think that it's in part a fire road, so the fire department, I would think, would have some weight in influencing the town board to free up some resources to clear, especially if the road is potentially blocked by the dumping.
Right, right. Who would be a good contact at the East Hampton Fire Department? Or is that Wayne, is that Bridgehampton or East Hampton or Sag Harbor?
Hey, guys, if we could take a step back here for a moment. It's a trustee road, okay? It's within the scope of our ability to take care of this and get this taken care of. I don't know that we necessarily need to prevail upon the town board to do this, okay? Unless some member of the town board's been dumping their garbage in there, I don't necessarily think it's their responsibility.
Oh, it's not, but I think they might be willing or interested even in cooperating, especially if it's a fire hazard.
Well, when you say cooperating, financially participating?
Well, freeing up highway department resources. I mean, they're doing what they're doing. They're just doing it on Town Line Road. Like we use the harbor masters,
Yeah. And actually, I'm not sure that Steve needs the town board to direct him on that. He has in the past demonstrated some discretion in terms of helping us out, but the question becomes of at what point what's the threshold of helping out to just kind of freeload?
Well, I see it as it's mutually beneficial to everybody here. It's not necessarily strictly a trustee issue. That's how I see it.
Well,
I mean, if they're all booked up, fine. Well, maybe they.
Well, I think, we'd have to be able to get him, or Kevin or someone down to look at this and establish a scope of work and see what's really required.
all right.
So,
Rick, have you called Steve?
I have not, no.
Okay, so we're speculating. I can call Steve and find out whether and if he can get involved in this.
All right. So that's an important piece. You know, we're going to really try to go forward, you know, with a major cleanup to the two big areas, which are the illegal dumping area and the fire pit. And then the third piece is a general cleanup. And the fourth piece is a possible gate.
What actually, you know, this question was raised by someone earlier. I don't think it ever got addressed. What fire district is that in?
No, I believe it's Bridgehampton.
Hey, Jim, do you still know any of the guys over there in Bridgehampton Fire Department?
Yeah, sure.
All right.
Maybe this could be one of our first joint projects with the board.
Well, I got to shoot with the Bridgehampton Fire Department next Sunday. So.
All right, that's awesome.
Photo shoot?
Yeah, something. Like
All right. The holiday calendar?
Yeah.
Let's move on to administrative before this gets out of control. We'll do payment of the bills. We have Optimum, $136.76. East Hampton Marina, $811 to winterize the 3 Mile Harbor pump out boat. East Hampton Star, $53.57 for legal notice on scallop season. Western Surety Bond, $875 annual bond. Do I have a motion to pay the bill?
I'll make a motion to pay the bills.
Excuse me, Francis?
Yes.
It's Rick. I'm sorry to interrupt. May I say something on the bills real quick? Thank you. At the last meeting, Mr. Borner had requested an interim payment on his research work that he presented on this evening. And I was wondering if it would be appropriate to add that to this meeting's financial agenda or put it on for the next meeting.
Well, I think it was, what was it, $1,250?
Yes.
That is
I thought we voted
correct.
on that. Did we not?
I think we voted to pay it to him after he came and presented, which is today. So I believe I'm able to issue him the check tomorrow, but it doesn't hurt to add it. Just vote twice on it.
I just wanted to make sure it was properly approved. And
Yes,
reviewed.
I was planning to draw it tomorrow morning. I believe we voted to pay him the money, but to withhold it until
Okay.
today.
Is everyone okay with that? I just want to make sure everyone was clear.
Yeah.
Sounds like
Thank
we're
you very
good.
much. Sorry to interrupt.
No problem. So we have a motion, a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? All right. We have minutes for October 26th and November 9th.
I've read them both, made suggestions.
So anyone
Anybody
want to
else?
make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes for October 16th and, November 9th.
Or a second?
Who's the
All in
second?
favor?
Who's the second, Tim?
Aye.
Okay, thank
Anyone
you, Tim.
opposed? Okay. And financial reports from October 31st. No, we'll table that one. And do we want to continue the discussion on staggering the trustees' election cycles?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Francis, hey, Francis, this is
Yes.
Rick.
Yeah.
I'll jump in there. I continue to feel that 6 years is a little bit too long. And
Mhm.
I think that keeping it simple with a top 4 getting 4 years and the bottom 5 getting 2 years maintains some consistency on the board, term over term, and is, I think, a little more manageable time frame. so the board is fresh and challenged and, kind of kept on their toes. I think that's important. Thank you.
So what you're proposing is we would have one election cycle where 4 trustees would run and another one where 5 would run.
I believe so.
That opens up the possibility of a majority winning all 5 seats in one election, if you want. I mean, that's there now, and it
Well,
doesn't really
it's
change
just
much. But
Francis, that's just a proportional
Right.
difference. It creates, the same opportunity arises with 9 seats or 7 seats.
right.
Or 3 seats.
Yeah, I just think
Anybody
6 is a long time, and but I'd like to hear from other people. Thank you.
Would they?
No, I get it.
Yeah.
I thought, there would be some discussion on the length of that term.
Yeah.
Have we gotten any feedback at all from anybody?
We were
No,
gonna
the
look
office
to see if there was
hasn't.
anyone. We were going to look to see if anyone knew a person or a consulting firm that had something to offer. I don't know if anyone has made a contact.
Yeah,
regarding that
I'm still looking into that, but I don't have any results as of yet. I'm gonna need to table that part of the conversation.
I was gonna put a call into Anita Katz, who's one of the heads of the Board of Elections, but they're a little crazed up there right now.
I know they're still counting ballots coming in, absentee ballots.
I'm trying to
But
get a recommendation from her.
I think we should.
Anybody else have any comment or suggestions?
I think we should consult with someone who is knowledgeable about election regulations and so forth that could guide us. And so, Chris, if you can check into that in the next couple of weeks, and then anybody else who has suggestions, maybe we reach out then and to someone, as you said, Bill, Anita Katz would be somebody. I have someone in mind, a couple of people actually I could contact, and maybe give those names to you, Chris.
Yep, that sounds great.
Okay.
Okay. Anybody have anything else before we say goodnight?
Just for the record, you have 0 callers.
All right.
Thank you, Matt.
You want a motion to close the meeting?
Jim, just one thing while I have you here before you leave. We got a couple of documents today, Heidi Ho and so forth. So I was kind of waiting to see if we're going to address those, but next time.
Well, no, we could. I saw the Heidi Ho one. I read through the determination. It falls in line with what their original application was for. We could vote. I would feel comfortable voting right now just to send the letter to the building department, sort of aligning this with the ZBA determination and finishing that thought.
Can we
Make a motion? I would second it.
can we make that available to the rest of the board to look at before we vote on it?
Sure.
Yeah. So what we can do this.
Okay.
I don't think there's any urgency on this, guys. We could do this next meeting.
All right. They're asking for a letter of support. Brittany, so, okay, that's it.
I mean, I don't think anybody else has seen that determination yet.
Okay.
So,
okay.
I
all right.
can get it out to the rest of the board or, okay.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Happy
All right.
Thanksgiving.
All right.
All right. Happy
Everybody have a
Thanksgiving,
wonderful
everybody.
holiday.
Yeah.
See you in
Okay.
December.
Guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Matt.
You're
Matt?
very welcome. Happy
Oh, he's still
Thanksgiving.
there. Happy Thanksgiving, Matt. Thank you. Good night, everybody.